This creamy chocolate oatmeal is a healthier grown-up version of Cocoa Puffs. But the great thing is that your kids are gonna love it too. I came across this recipe in Food 52 Simply Genius, and I thought it was a genius recipe. 5 ingredients and about 5 minutes. So we're gonna get going. I'm Judy Matesky. I am a registered dietitian as well as a certified culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. So today we are making oatmeal. But one thing about oatmeal is that I feel like oatmeal sometimes, when you eat it and you just eat oatmeal, and maybe like a sweetened oatmeal in the morning, whether it's from a packet that you're opening up and throwing in the microwave, or if you're making your own and just adding brown sugar, it tends to not hold you. You know, if you've noticed, you can kind of eat oatmeal at maybe 7 o'clock in the morning, and by 9 o'clock you're famished. And there is a reason for that. It's, you know, absorbed relatively quickly, especially with that extra sugar. It's mostly carbohydrate. So we're trying to balance this and making this a little bit healthier, but also really delicious. So it's 5 ingredients. We're gonna get started. This recipe is for 2. The original recipe was for 1. And the reason I'm saying that is because what's a little bit different about this recipe is that you're cooking it actually in a non-stick skillet rather than, you know, like a regular pan. 2 things. It cooks faster, a little faster, number 1. And I think it just gets a little bit creamier. And, well, 3 reasons. And then it's a lot easier to clean the pan since it's nonstick. So if you're making 1 serving, if you just wanted to do a real quick 1 serving, you could use like an 8-inch non-stick skillet, which is what I have here. I'm not doubling the recipe because the recipe is written for a serving of 2, but so that I'm going to use a 10-inch skillet. All right, so we're going to get this going, and we're going to set the heat to probably medium high. So I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. But okay, so we're using old-fashioned rolled oats. I get this huge, well, actually it comes 2 huge bags in a huge box from Costco, but I do use a lot of oats for a lot of things. I'll use it to make oat flour, and I'll use it in a lot of baking. And so I am using this you know, massive bag of oats. And we're using 1 cup. So 1 cup of oats is the equivalent of 2 servings. So 1 cup of raw oats, once you cook it up, is going to be a 2 servings. So that's going to go in. And you can, the nice thing about this recipe is that you can even double the recipe that you're going to be given, which is for 2. So you can make it for 4. You could even make it for 6 because it lasts really well in the refrigerator and it also freezes well. All right, we'll talk a little bit about that. So I have 2.5 cups of milk. I am just using regular dairy fat-free milk. I don't particularly want the saturated fat from the dairy milk. I'm using healthy plant fat later on. You could use soy milk, which would be another great choice. Soy milk is higher in protein than any other plant-based milk. So I'm using the dairy milk because I want the protein in here. We want this balance of the high fiber carbohydrate with some protein and some healthy fat. You could use an alternative plant-based milk. Just know that they're not going to be very high in protein. All right, so this is just regular fat-free dairy milk. Oh, it's kind of splashing all over. 2.5 cups of that. And I'm going to turn my heat up a little bit so we can get that kind of going. And now we're going to add the cocoa powder. So whatever cocoa powder you have, if you have Hershey, if you have, you know, another more gourmet brand, this one I think I picked up at one of the markets. And the original recipe called for a little bit more cocoa. I kind of thought it seemed a little too chocolatey. Now, I don't even know if that could possibly be a thing for many of you, but for me it was. So I cut back. I'm going to use 2 tablespoons for 2 servings. So basically 1 tablespoon per serving. If you want it more chocolatey, by all means, you can add more. If you want it a little less, then maybe cut back to maybe 1 tablespoon. I felt like 2 seemed to give you that really rich chocolatey flavor without it being like a little bit too overpowering. Now we're just going to add a little pinch of salt because the little bit of salt really does bring out the chocolatiness of chocolate. So when you add salt to chocolate, it even makes it more chocolatey. So we're going to add a little pinch of salt. And that is pretty much it. So I'm going to get a whisk because we're going to just whisk this around. So you want to just kind of combine the cocoa powder and the milk and the oats. And we're going to try to get this up. It's already starting to little bubble around the edges. So the nice thing about this is because it's you know, it's in a broader based pan like the skillet, it's going to come up to like a boil much more quickly. So we're going to bring it up to a boil, and then we're just going to turn it down and then just bring it to a simmer for like a couple of minutes. So, you know, old-fashioned oats or 5-minute oats, that's what we're using. You couldn't really use steel cut oats in something like this. It would just take, well, I mean, I take that back. You could. It would just, you would need more liquid, and it would take a lot longer. It would take probably, you know, closer to 30 minutes to cook. And because you're cooking this in this wide-based skillet, you might have to even add a little bit more liquid because some of that liquid might evaporate over time, you know, because it's going to take a little longer to cook. So really, it's the old-fashioned oats, and that's kind of like a middle ground. So if you're, you know, monitoring blood sugar levels, or if you have a tendency to have blood sugar that maybe, you know, can drop on you, steel cut oats would probably be the best choice if you wanted to cook this a little longer, because it is a little slower digestion when you're using steel cut oats. The next best alternative would be these 5-minute old-fashioned oats, because they're not broken down and processed as much as the instant oats. So we don't really want the 1 minute or the instant oats, because they really, not only do they cook fast, but they are digested and absorbed very quickly. So that is not necessarily the best for blood sugar, especially if that's something that you're, you know, kind of monitoring. So the 5-minute oats gives us a nice dose of fiber. Now I mentioned the protein, and when it comes to protein and at breakfast, it's really an important component of your breakfast. Most of us need probably at least 20 grams of protein, maybe a little bit more, depending on your size and whether you're male or female, but you really want that protein in the morning. So that's why oatmeal by itself, it's not going to be that very high in protein. So making it with the dairy milk or the soy milk will give you like an additional 8 grams of protein, in addition to the already like 3 grams of protein that you're going to get from the oats themselves. And then we're going to finish this with almond butter or peanut butter, either one, which is going to bring a little bit more protein and the essential component for satiety, which is a little bit of fat. So the almond butter is a healthy plant-based fat. Peanut butter would be the same. I didn't have almond butter, so the recipe is really written as an almond oatmeal recipe. I have some natural peanut butter. So when you're buying your peanut butter or your almond butter, if you can't do nuts, if you're allergic, then maybe like a sun butter or a sunflower seed butter you could use. But when you're looking for any kind of a nut butter, you want to make sure you're buying natural. It should just be the ingredients on the side, which if I look at this, it's just organic peanuts and sea salt. And the sodium level is really low. They don't typically add a lot of salt to peanut butter, so it's okay if it has 2 ingredients. It's the nuts and some salt. It could just be the nuts themselves, but you don't want any additional oils added. And what I found when I'm looking for almond butter is that almond butters are tricky, because a lot of the almond butters, even the ones that are quote unquote natural, they're adding often palm oil or palm kernel oil to almond butter, and that helps to keep it a little bit creamier, keeps it from separating a little bit, but it also adds, you know, saturated fat. So the whole point of using nut butters, almond butters, peanut butters, or other type of nut butters, we want the low saturated fat content. We don't want the saturated fat. So you're really looking for your nut butters to just be the nuts with maybe a little bit of salt that might be added. And it's not easy to find almond butter that's like that. So you really have to read your ingredients. I found the almond butter that I found that worked really well was from Costco. Costco's almond butter. It's not their brand. I forget the brand that they carry, but that's, I have to actually pick some up this weekend. That is the brand that I tend to get. I really like it. It's nice and creamy, but it's really just almonds. I think it might have a little bit of salt added. Okay, so if you can see, I don't know if it's hard, I know sometimes the angle's here, but I don't want to move it because it's a little thick. So you can see, or a little high in the pan, that you do need a 10-inch skillet for 2 servings of this oatmeal, because it's going to boil up, and this is one of those things that you don't necessarily want to walk away. You do want to kind of stand here and keep an eye on it and stir it. Now I have my heat way up because I'm trying to cook this a little bit faster, so you'd probably want to turn it down, but you know what oatmeal does. It really does. You know, the minute you stop looking at it, it boils over. And you know, the soluble fiber in oatmeal, although super healthy, fantastic for heart health, lowers cholesterol levels. It's good for our gut bacteria, so our healthy bacteria it loves soluble fiber as a food source, and that's a really good thing. So we like to have it in our diet. I'm just going to turn this down a little bit because it's really boiling. But it also it's what makes oatmeal so gummy and thick, and it's fabulous as far as, I think, texture, but it's also a bugger to clean. So you don't really want this kind of boiling over on top of your stove, because that would not be fun. All right, so this is really kind of coming together. It's going to thicken up. Like once you cook this for a few minutes, you know, obviously they're 5-minute oats, so that would be 5 minutes. It thickens. It starts to thicken. It doesn't have to be completely thick when you're done. It'll be a little bit runnier, but it'll thicken as it cools. So I'm just going to let this go a few more minutes. Now, if you want to batch cook this, which is what I usually do, I'll just use like a Dutch oven. If I'm making this, I'm going to make more than 2 servings. If you're already making it, you might as well make more, right? And so I'll do that. And then really quite a neat little hack is if you buy the coffee cups, like the disposable coffee cups, the paper coffee cups with a lid, and you put the serving of your oatmeal in those coffee cups, and maybe a little saran wrap or some plastic wrap on top, put the lid on, and then pop it in your freezer. Then there are these little to-go breakfasts. So you can grab one out of the freezer. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off. Grab it out of the freezer, and when you get where you're going, you just pop it in the microwave. Now it's gonna be on the thicker side, so if you have milk available, you might wanna splash it with some milk, or if you're at home, do the same thing, but you might wanna add milk to it. I think that just helps to, you know, thin it down a little bit if you don't want it to be quite so thick. All right, so this pretty much now is done. So we have the chocolate, the real creamy chocolate oatmeal. It smells really, really good. The thing is, your kids are gonna love this. So if you grew up with, you know, eating chocolatey cereal in the morning, this is definitely a much healthier, just as delicious alternative. But again, this is really something that your kids will absolutely love. Then the final step will be it does require a little bit of sweetness. This would be, to me, it's hard, if there's a bitterness to that cocoa, because there's no sugar in here right now. So it's a little too bitter, in my opinion, to eat it without some sweetener. I think a little maple syrup works really well in here. So you can just sweeten it to your taste. I think you need at least 1 or 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, but do it with 1 and see how it tastes. And if you feel like you need a little bit more, add a little more. I'm gonna top mine with some fruit. So we'll dish this out a little bit, and then I'm gonna top it with some fruit. So you could use some berries, fresh berries, or defrosted frozen berries. I think would be great. Strawberries would be amazing on this. I didn't have any berries, so I'm gonna top it with some chopped apple and just a little dash of cinnamon, because cinnamon and chocolate go really well together. All right, so we have the maple syrup added. Now I'm gonna add, like I said, I have creamy peanut butter. I didn't have the almond butter, and you're gonna use about 3 tablespoons. You can start with 2 if you don't want that much, but I think 3 is nice because that gives you enough of the protein and the healthy fat from the peanut butter per serving. So I'm not measuring, but this is a tablespoon. So you're just gonna swirl this in, and if you want to, you could dish this out before you add the nut butter into your bowl, and then put your like a tablespoon of nut butter on top and just swirl it in, because it looks kind of cool when you do that. So I'm gonna just do it right now, so you can see how it's gotten nice and creamy, and you can see the little swirl of the nut butter. All right, so this is done. So if you just want to take your bowl that you're going to eat it in, and we'll put some in here. Again, 2 servings, because this is the perfect serving size for 2 people. If you do divide this in half, you're going to get all of those nutrients from everything that we added, and it's got some staying power. This with that almond butter or peanut butter, you really do get the benefit from the protein and that healthy fat. So here's our little bowl. I have some chopped apples, so let me just show you real quick. Some red and green apples. I'm just gonna sprinkle those right on top. Just nice to bring some fruit in for, again, a little bit more healthy balance here. And then a little sprinkle of cinnamon right on top. And there we've got it. You've got your chocolate almond oatmeal. I would take a bite, but it's probably really hot. So give it a try. I think you're gonna love it. I think your kids are gonna love it. And batch cook it so that you have it ready to go and you don't have to be making it every morning. All right, stay well. I will see you next week. I'll be back again. I've got another great recipe for you. So I will see you in about 7 days. Take care. Bye-bye.